John Barros was one of the most selfless, godly men I have ever known. He was a hero, and I miss him all the time. Welcome to Yesterday Was Easy. I wanted to film some episodes outside of the regular lineup to highlight Christian men who have emulated what this show is all about. I'm going to call them portraits of godly men. And as I mentioned, this initial one is on my dear friend John Barros. I'm releasing this video on February 15th, 2025, 1 year to the day John left behind his sin suit and entered eternity into the presence of his Lord and Savior. This is a day I will never forget, as it was extremely painful and at the same time a joyous relief. John had been battling pancreatic cancer for approximately 6 months, fighting it to the bitter end, but finally succumbing to the disease that fateful day. I was able to record the audio of the final FaceTime call I had with him just 9 days before he passed, while he was still able to communicate. I am grateful for this recording, as I occasionally listen to it when I want to hear his voice. I was incredibly sad that day, as I knew I would never be able to talk to my friend again this side of heaven, but also relieved, as I knew he was no longer suffering and was now with his Lord, whom he loved with all his heart. February 15th, as far as I am concerned, will always be John Barros Day. Every year, this day will serve as a reminder of John's faithful life and the incredible work he did for Christ. It will also be a day I long to hear his jovial and calming voice. John was one of the most cool, calm, and collected men I have ever known. He was a steady anchor you could lean on in the midst of any storm. You could call him to see how he was holding up, and he would always find a way to encourage you and distract from his trials. He genuinely loved everyone he came in contact with, even his enemies. And as we learned at the end of his life, everyone also loved him. Strangely enough, even those same enemies. John lived out Proverbs 24:10 through 12, which says, "If you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, 'Behold, we did not know this,' does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work?" You see, John spent years of his life facing adversity and never fainted until his body could no longer hold back the cancer. His strength was indeed not small, but great. John spent roughly the last third of his life rescuing those being taken away to death and holding back those stumbling to the slaughter. I know that he who kept watch over John's soul knew it, and I'm confident he has been repaid according to his work. After spending years building a successful construction company, John sold it so he could stand full-time at the Orlando Women's Center to rescue his preborn neighbors from the throes of death. He spent over 2 decades of his life, day in and day out, at this place of death, pleading with mothers, fathers, and loved ones not to murder their precious children. He truly was a voice for the voiceless. John very rarely missed a day during this time, despite the adversity he faced. He fought through multiple bouts with cancer, a stroke, and an aneurysm that could have entered his brain at any given moment. Approximately 5 years before he passed, John called me one day and told me about the aneurysm, fully expecting to drop dead at the abortion mill one day. He lived the last years of his life expecting to die that way and was fully content to do so. Sickness had riddled his body so badly during this time that he could only stand in front of that place of death by using crutches. To this day, the 2-foot by 4-foot chunk of concrete where he stood was so worn down by him that he has literally left his mark. In fact, at the time of dropping this video, if you open your Maps app on your phone and search for Orlando Women's Center, the street view still shows John standing there. Such a fitting reminder of such a faithful man and his permanence to that piece of earth. All those years, John also endured some of the most despicable hatred and mocking I have ever seen, and did so with a smile on his face. This came from the enemies I previously mentioned. John didn't view them as enemies, but they sure took pride in acting as his enemies. John knew that Satan was the real enemy, and that the carnies, as he lovingly called them, were just operating as the devil's earthly minions. Despite all of this, he never once complained. He was so willing and grateful to do this difficult work when so very few would, because he knew he was literally saving lives, not just physically, but spiritually as well. I am positive John now knows, but for us here on earth, there's no real way to know exactly how many children are alive today because of him. Easily thousands. There is also no way to know for sure how many people have come to Christ through the gospel he preached. The miraculous stories John would tell of God rescuing babies and saving sinners through his faithfulness were awe-inspiring and at times mind-boggling. John would just laugh and give God all the glory. This was never about him or even the babies, but was always about glorifying his Savior. In August of 2024, we are blessed to go visit John in Orlando, knowing it would probably be the last time we would see him alive in person. I will forever cherish those few days of food, fellowship, and ministry with him at the mill. At this point, John had started chemo and wasn't eating much, causing him to rapidly lose weight. We made sure he ate and ate and ate over those few days. I believe he briefly gained some weight, which he was thankful for. After spending a couple hours at the mill with him for the very last time, we had lunch at his favorite barbecue place. Pastor Jeff asked John what he most looked forward to in heaven. I will never forget this answer, and I pray I someday can achieve this same mindset. John simply replied, not sinning anymore. Despite John's years of faithfulness and selfless sacrifice, he recognized that he was still a sinner and longed for the day he would never sin again against his Savior. That was John Barros. How a man lived like that blows my mind. May I one day understand and emulate this. I miss my friend all the time. I miss his voice. I miss his laugh. Some days I wish I could pick up the phone and call him just to hear him one more time. But I am selfish, and I still sin. John is forever happy, without pain, with his Savior, and no longer sins. Yesterday was easy. Be like John Barros. Stay hard.